Hey, Rob.
Hey, Jen.
What are you listening to this week? Welcome to season 6 of What Are You Listening To? The weekly podcast created to foster community through music by sharing the stories behind the songs that soundtrack our lives. Some of the songs are old, some new, all good. I'm Jenn Tully, and this week I'm joined once again by Rob Kassees. Rob is an expert in the field of music and one of the lead complainers on the 1001 Album Complaints podcast. 1001 Album Complaints is a weekly podcast where musicians dive deep into the stories behind classic records that, according to Robert Dimery's book, you must listen to before you die. Rob, along with his fellow complainers, dive into each album with backstories and jokes to determine if you do, in fact, need to listen to that album before you die. In addition to making music and hosting and producing the podcast, Rob's areas of expertise also include production techniques, songwriting, indie music marketing, and an insane working knowledge of the greater Western musical canon. This week, Rob's going to share one of his side projects with us, the Beverly Crushers. We'll discuss how this band got started and some of the musical influences on the new album. And of course, we'll do this through 4 songs. 2 are Rob's picks and 2 are mine. Which songs do you think we're going to discuss? Tune into our conversation to find out. And in case our song picks are new to you, we'll publish a playlist with the episode so you don't miss a beat. With that, let's get started. Rob, super excited to have you back on the show. Please tell me, what are you listening to this week?
Thanks so much for having me, Jen. Super excited to be back on the show and chat about music with you once again. And yeah, for this week, I wanted to pull a couple of songs that I think most informed my aesthetic, especially a band like the Beverly Crushers. So the first song I picked is called Kiss Me, Son of God by They Might Be Giants.
Such a good pick. Not a lot of people are going to bring They Might Be Giants to the show. So I
Sure.
was happy to see this one. And this is from their album Lincoln, which came out in '88, which was before. I thought it was after, but I was wrong. It was before kind of their album that everybody knows, I think, Flood.
Yes.
Was their most popular. I think that came out in like 1990-ish. And that one has Birdhouse in Your Soul and Istanbul, not Constantinople. Like those are the 2 that I think of when I think of They Might Be Giants. But this
Absolutely.
one, I have to tell you, I couldn't believe it was from 1988. So I'm really interested to hear about why this one, because I have
Sure.
some thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's great. So They Might Be Giants were my first I'm the only one who knows or cares about this band when I was around 12 or 13. I was such a nerdy kid, huge surprise. And their material really spoke to me. The absurdity of it, the humor of it, also these really interesting production choices, instrumentation choices. They really know how to compose. There is a craft to it, but it has this art rock sheen to it. And I think it was one of the early things that helped show me that when it comes to music, when it comes to art, there are no rules. So this was my first concert that I ever went to when I was about
Wow.
14. My I went to the big city, which was Philadelphia, to an all ages club. My parents dropped me off. I went in there with a buddy. I think I was 14 or 15. It was great. And anyway, I picked this song and wanted to go back to the well of They Might Be Giants, not only because they're an old favorite of mine, but because I think the theme is that it blends. The theme is that it blends tongue-in-cheek writing with lovely composition and production, right? It's silly, but I feel like it does have something to say. I feel like it stands the test of time. It's not clever just for clever's sake. So that aesthetic just really, really spoke to me that you can be you know, imagine this. You can be entertained while you're listening to music. You can even laugh and smile a little bit and have this kind of goofy lack of self-seriousness, but also be serious about the craft itself.
Yeah, I think that that's a great way to sum it up. And I think it's a great way to sort of segue into the Beverly Crushers too, which is I love what you said about how this expanded your mind in terms of like, oh, hey, I don't have to just be an arena rock band or, folky or whatever like category you want to fit into. And I can't think of a lot of bands that sound like they might be giants, right? Like when I was even trying to compare, I'm like a little bit like Cake, maybe like
Sure.
Cake falls kind of into that category. But tell me about like about the Beverly Crushers. Once you give me that sort of explanation, now I can see how this would be an influence. But tell me like how that kind of came into being.
Yeah, it came into being because first of all, the Beverly Crushers is a Star Trek: The Next Generation tribute band,
Love.
and I grew up watching Star Trek: The Next Generation with my parents, and have multiple friends, who are in the same category, including my co-host on 1001 Album Complaints, Tom. And so I've been
Yes.
playing in bands with Tom for over 20 years now in various configurations, various bands we've written together. And so this one came about as a writing prompt exercise, as just a kind of, because it was something we would make inside jokes about. We'd laugh about the show. For those who might not know, The Next Generation is kind of like an early CSI in space, 1 hour drama, but it's also, I think, has a lot of philosophical components to it, as well as interesting sci-fi ideas. It's great. I actually do think it holds up for the most part. And so we set this writing prompt to ourselves, like, oh, let's just write some songs about this world, these characters who face all these weird, interesting challenges in the future, and they have a different way of approaching politics and the economy, and they have weird technology like the holodeck and things of this nature. So that would be a fun way to do it, and it immediately kind of took on a life of its own. We were jamming together with some other guys. We immediately were able to write some songs, and the whole project just kind of crystallized very quickly, so we knew we were on the right track with something.
I love it. It's almost like fan fiction, right? But set to music. Like I think that it's so cool, and I love that you brought up too that they were. It was fun to write from this perspective because they have different, political systems. They have different technology, that will take me all the way back full circle to Kiss Me Son of God,
Oh yeah.
which listening to that again, I was so shocked that it was from 1988. And this could be a very polarizing comment, but here we go. I feel like it could have been written about Donald Trump. Like,
Sure. Oh sure. Well,
right? Like listen,
y-
or Elon Musk or like one of
sure.
like the leaders now. I was like, this feels so now that I really had to. I'm like, oh, new material from They Might Be Giants. Like the message was so resonant to like this current time and place that I
Sure.
couldn't believe it was from '88.
I agree in the sense that, of course, fascism is on the rise. I'm very worried about those two individuals you just mentioned. I think that where it diverges to me and what makes it really great as songcraft is that it's not just about or from the perspective of a brutal dictator.
Sure,
It's also one who has just a little bit of self-awareness, more than I would say those other guys you just mentioned,
you're
Trump
right.
and Elon, because he kind of knows he's gone too far. And there's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek element
You're right.
to
Yeah.
what he's talking about. So it's serious without being overly serious. That's what I liked about it. And to me, that is what makes for great songwriting, that you actually got inside the head of the character and gave them a little bit of depth, even within the concept of a, sort of a silly or extreme idea for a song.
Yeah, and good music is going to be good music. I shared this with you before we even ever, decided to record and talk about this album. I'm not a Trekkie. I'm not a person that watched either version. I mean, I know enough just from being around, and I am
Sure,
like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings all day. Like, I'm trying to not, like, I definitely don't escape the nerd category. That's just one
sure.
area I never, like, got super into, and I still really loved that album. I shared with you there will be I do have a pick this week from it, so we'll get
Nice.
to that later. But
Yes.
I loved that I still was able to get a lot from the album and pick out songs that I like. One in particular, like I said, we'll talk about later, that I've literally had on repeat since I first heard the album. And so I love that too, right? Good music is good music, and it doesn't really matter what the subject matter is, whether you're into it or not. You can still appreciate the song and the music.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That's very high praise. And, perhaps I'm going to disappoint any Trekkies listening, but Tom and I, my writing partner, don't really consider ourselves Trekkies either. I have
Yeah,
watched the entirety of the Next Generation series and enjoyed it heartily. I know a lot about it, but I think of us more as music nerds and
yeah,
recording nerds who are trying to exercise something. So, but yeah, you're right. The songs, my songwriting perspective, and we'll talk about one of my songs later, as you mentioned, is to try to get inside the head of the character and find some universal element. I don't mean to overstate the case, but I'm trying to find something that is transcends the nature of the writing prompt
yeah.
and it has a universal sentiment to it. I think that's the goal. At the same time, there's all these cool, fun little Easter eggs built in about the show. If you do not know the show, I want to be clear. I recommend the show. I think it's a lot of fun. I think Patrick Stewart is particularly amazing. He's my captain. He's my version of what a leader should be in the world, to be honest with you. So by all means, watch it. But no, I wouldn't consider myself a Trekkie either.
Yeah. Well, I think the album stands on its own with or without that. Like I said, again, when we start to talk about, one of my picks this week, we'll delve into it more. But when you talk about finding a universal truth, I feel like that's a really lovely segue into your second pick, which again, I'm so excited to have this song on the show. Please tell me what your second song was.
Yes, my second pick is A Boy Named Sue, as performed by Johnny Cash live.
So freaking good. And again, universal truth, we all can relate to this, right? Like some of us have names that we love. Some of us have names that every third person of a certain age have. I think Rob, you're not really that excluded from that group
It's
either,
true.
but
It's true.
the Jens and the Heathers of the world hold a special place in that. And the Michaels, we have like names that reigned supreme for many years. So there
Sure.
are a lot of us.
And right, and I guess as parents, you don't really know what the most popular name of the year is going to be when you're naming your kid Michael in 1980. That's the year I was born, and I went to school lots of Michaels.
Uh-huh.
So it's not really your fault. But yeah, listen, I think okay, the through line here, in case you can't see it, is humor and joy in the context of great songcraft.
Yeah.
And in my estimation, this is one of the greatest songs ever written. It's near perfect. It's just this perfect story that has a universal truth in it, as you mentioned. And I think that Johnny Cash delivering it, even though he didn't write it, in
Mhm.
this particular live rendition, it's absolutely the definitive version. It just feels like it was made for him.
I completely agree. And I love, like, something that I love about old country music is I love a good story song, right? Like, I love a good song that's going to give you a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then my another favorite thing in like old classic country is that twist at the end, right? Like, you get to
Yeah.
the end of this song and you think, like, oh, he's having this really beautiful sentimental moment. And he's going to also name his son Sue. And then he's like, no way, like, terrible. So
Yes.
I love everything about this song as well. And I think just for listeners that don't know, Johnny Cash did perform the song. This version is recorded live at San Quentin State, not at Folsom Prison, but at San Quentin State. And the writer of this song is somebody that I imagine a lot of you are familiar with, listeners, is the amazing, wonderful Shel Silverstein, who gave us, the classics Where the Sidewalk Ends. I read that book probably 1,000 times as soon as I could read. We read it to my daughter when she was a baby. I mean, like, you really, and he had a reasonably prolific songwriting career too. Like,
Hmm.
this isn't the only song that Shel Silverstein ever wrote, but certainly made famous by Johnny Cash in this live version, who I also wholeheartedly agree, like, delivers it like it was written for him.
Absolutely. And Johnny Cash did other of Shel Silverstein's songs at different times, including on the Folsom Prison concert album. And yeah, I just love Shel Silverstein
Me
too. That
too.
just really hits me in the childhood, reading and he not only wrote Where the Sidewalk Ends in those books, but he's the illustrator behind them
Illustrator.
too.
Hmm.
He's just a world-class weirdo in the best
Yes.
possible way. So I definitely recommend diving into his stuff. Yeah, so cool. I love, like you said, where the song goes. It grabs your attention with a story. It feels, they don't have to have a lot of explanation. You understand what's going on. You understand the meaning of the story. And then it has that twist and that turn at the end, which it feels like it was an earned twist or payoff to the tale, right? Of
Yep.
him realizing that, why his father did it. regardless of the fact that he was a deadbeat father. There was a wisdom to naming your kid Sue. So I just think it's kind of perfect.
Yeah, and just like, he talks about the gravel in the gut and the spit in your eye, like, that's still just, like, ever since I was a kid, I love that line, and I still, when I was, like, listening and living with the song again this week, I was just like, "This is such a freaking good song," and it comes into that conversation. My, like, holy trifecta to debate with people about is often The Shining, right? Is it
Mm,
Kubrick? Is it Nicholson? Is it King that made that movie what it is? Like, this is another one where, and I always say it's all three, right? Like, you could not, that movie wouldn't be what it was without all three of them. They're equal contributors to me. This
sure.
is the same thing. Like, I think a lot of other people maybe could have done this song or performed this song, but the way that Johnny Cash owns it, and just, it feels so organic, yet it feels like it was written for him. Like, I just think it's perfect. And I love them both independently, but I never want to see them independent, right? Like,
Absolutely.
I want this merger to stay fully intact always. I love it.
I totally agree. And they say when a singer takes on a song to do it correctly, I think Frank Sinatra said something like this. You really have to embody the emotion of the characters in the song. And Cash does that so perfectly. And 1001 Album Complaints recently covered his other live record at a prison, Folsom Prison,
Mhm.
which, as I talk to you, Jen, is only a stone's throw away from my current location, actually.
Oh,
But and I should say, Folsom, California, where Folsom Prison is located, is a lovely town. Intel is based there. It's quite affluent and nice, and you'd never know that there was a infamous prison there. But anyway, one of the things I noticed about Folsom Prison is that Johnny Cash, his persona on stage is more like a stand-up comedian.
yeah.
Like, he knows how to talk and interact and deliver almost punchlines within the song. So in that way, this was really built for him.
Yeah, agreed. And he's like falls into the genre of, like, to be very top of mind right now just because a complete unknown is everywhere. But, like, he's like one of those Bob Dylan artists, right? Like, you're not listening to Johnny Cash because you love his beautiful melodic voice, right? Like,
Sure.
you're listening to Johnny Cash because he sounds like nobody else. For me, it's just that deep bass baritone for the longing, and again the organicness that you hear in the way he delivers a song, or like the comedy, the punchline, the entertainment of it all. Like, he's a world-class entertainer, and so I think that you have all of those things like happening as well, in the hands of someone as skilled as Johnny Cash. I also wondered, I didn't know if this was a through line or not too, but I imagine there's maybe even subconsciously there's something there. It was interesting to me that this followed They Might Be Giants, because I immediately went back to Boat of a Car,
Oh,
another
okay.
They Might
Oh,
Be Giants
yeah.
song that samples Daddy Sang Bass, which is obviously a Johnny Cash song.
I had not made that connection, but that's very astute, and you're gonna make me play. That's off the first They Might Be
Yeah,
Giants record, the
it is.
so-called Pink album, and I think I should be playing that after our show today.
Yeah, yeah, I went back. Like I said, once I, like, listened to your pick, I was like, I gotta go back and revisit some of these albums, and kind of those first 3 to 4 albums were the ones where I was kind of into it, and so when I heard Boat of a Car and heard I mean, it almost starts with that, sample from Daddy Sang
Yeah,
Bass that,
totally.
I was like, "Oh, there is, I see the connection here." So,
Nice.
well, let's transition into my picks for the week. They are different than yours, but I feel like I have, again, a good explanation as to how these picks came about and why I thought they were relevant for this episode. So, my first pick is a song that has been everywhere since it was released, but it is a song called Rockman by mk.gee. So the single was from October of last year, and I am in love with this guy. Like, I love the album, Two Star and the Dream Police. It came out around this time last year, kind of early in the year. The song Alessis is also on this album. So good. Same with the song Dream Police. It is not the Cheap Trick song.
Yeah.
It is his own. And it is just so, like, I find his music so interesting. And I think the through line for me was that when I listened to the Beverly Crushers album, Enterprise, I heard so many influences immediately. Like, I pulled out, like, oh, this sounds like Steely Dan. Oh, this sounds like Pink Floyd. Oh, this, like, I felt like I could hear a lot of different things. And
Yeah.
that was what drew me to mk.gee also. Like, I listened to his music and I can immediately hear all of the influences. In a song like Rockman, I hear obviously the Police. I don't know how you could escape that.
Sure.
Um, I hear Genesis. I hear even like there's a whistle sample in the beginning that's very like Motley Crue, Van Halen to me.
Mm.
The Screaming Eagle gives me Steve Miller Band vibes from Fly Like an Eagle, right? Like there, and so that was like what was in my head as I was listening to Beverly Crushers, and I was thinking like, oh, what is this? Like this is the closest I could come to a song that immediately sent me on the path of like, oh, I hear a lot of different influences in this. What about you? Did you know this song? Do you have feeling? Oh, I know you have feelings. I'm
Of
not going to even
course.
ask that. Of
No,
course
of
you
course.
have feelings.
Well, listen, first of all, thank you. I had never heard this song. I had heard of this artist, but this had escaped me for whatever reason. I'm not always the most up on modern music, I'll be the first to admit. So but I enjoyed the song. I think it's a cool lo-fi kind of rock catchy song. It gave me a lot of some of those influences you mentioned, but also a lot of other stuff from the 80s. The
Yeah.
song that is sort of a guilty pleasure of mine that I kept being reminded of was Your Love by Outfield, or by The Outfield, I believe.
Oh,
So it's kind of that 80s rock, but then it also, I was getting some of the, let's call it the 21st century bedroom pop thing, the
yeah.
Bon Iver, the Fleet Foxes, so a nice amalgamation, and I'm excited to listen to more of this artist. Absolutely. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I believe at heart, he's a producer, I think. Like that's his like main thing. And this is kind of his foray into his own music. And I felt like you could tell that. Like you can tell that he loves putting different sounds together. I like that he uses a mic that sounds really tinny.
Hmm.
I mean, I think that's the mic. You would know better than I do, but it sounds it's not like auto tune. It's not like I find that kind of off putting usually, but I like that it sounds kind of far away or like
Yeah.
tinny is the word that comes to
It's
mind.
definitely purposely lo-fi, right?
Yeah.
I think that's part of what was calling to mind 80s. I mean, he's using effects like reverb and a little bit of echo and things like that. But I think you can tell it's all in this modern era, right? People are making those choices very, very consciously to evoke something. It's not a technical lag, right? So you twist knobs and you get the exact sound you want, which is such a cool part about being alive in the modern era, right?
Right. Well, and making music. Yeah, I think that it definitely this kind of encapsulates a lot of that. And this is one of those rare occasions where I really don't know what the song is about. I've looked at the lyrics, but I don't remember them. I like the way this song feels. Like this one's all about like it just takes me to like a different place when I listen. And for once, like I really don't care too much about the lyrics. And from, our conversations, like I am a big lyrics gal. It's hard for me to get around bad lyrics. And I'm
Sure.
not saying the lyrics are bad to this song. They're just not a factor for me really. Like I just enjoy listening. And I feel like the album's kind of that way. Like it really is just like a good time and place kind of album without having to get too caught up in like the deeper meaning of what he's trying to say.
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes songs are just about a vibe, and even though I consider myself a lyrics person and a songwriter, there are plenty of times where I can unconsciously just tune that out and I don't really
Yeah.
think about it. You know what I mean? And when I go look back at it, I go, "Oh yeah, I never really noticed I never even bothered to notice the lyrics because it just didn't seem like that was the main thing that was happening in this song." And that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, case in point, to tease our upcoming episode, I recently was allowed again back on 1001 album complaints, and we covered an exciting 80s album that will definitely make for, I think your mailbag is going to be full from that episode. But that was one where going back and revisiting the lyrics like made me mad at myself, like made me
Yeah.
question my own taste as a young person.
Listen, I mean, everything is time and place. Let's be honest. It's very hard to rip these things out of their context, both in time
It's
and
true.
also in the personal context of the kinds of things you would be doing. Crushing Miller Lights on the hood
Right.
of a car or whatever.
Keg stands and things.
I get it. We've all been there, right?
Yeah. So it was definitely there are times when going back and looking at lyrics feel like, oh no, this is a problem. And other times, like you said, yes, where you can just vibe and enjoy. And I think McGee delivers in like that space. Like, and I think he'll be good 20 years from now. We'll see. But I think that's gonna. I think his stuff is gonna stand the test of time. But now to move on to my final pick this week, I get to fangirl a little bit. This is a song from the Beverly Crushers' new album, Enterprise, that just came out beginning of the year, I believe. And it is called Space and Time. So I mean, there's so much to get into here because, like I said, it's rare that I get to talk to the person that like performed and wrote a song that I am in
Yeah.
love with. I have to start. I'm sure that everybody says this, but for me, that opening guitar riff is magic. It's so
Oh.
simple. It's so yet I've not heard it. Like I kept thinking, like surely I've heard this somewhere else, and I can't think of where it is. And just when you think it's not going to get like, oh, how could they top this? Those freaking horns come in. Rob,
Well,
it's so
thank you.
good.
Thank you so much. That's very sweet of you to say. Yeah, it's funny. I actually found myself having to relearn that guitar riff just the other day because I was like, oh, I don't quite remember how to play it. Sometimes
Oh,
you write these things and then they record them, and then it's been a year, and you're like, oh, I went to try to play along with the recording because we're thinking about doing some live shows, and I was like, oh, I don't quite remember that. I have to take a beat.
it's so good. I can't wait for listeners to hear it. It just like immediately sucked me in. And then, not that the first verse isn't great, I love the chorus. That second verse, though, is flawless. Like it is, I don't, I just like ran the tables on your whole damn crew. I mean, like, just so much of it is like lyrics that I could just like get into and be excited about. So did you and Tom write this song? How did this? Is this like one of you guys together? Tell me like who
Yeah.
comprises the Beverly. It's not just you and Tom, is it?
No, we have a full band. So Tom plays bass, I play guitar. We both sing, usually on the songs that we write. And we tend to write kind of separately, although ultimately we help each other finish the arrangements and the productions. So this one originated with me. And then we do have two other members. We have a drummer, of course, and we have kind of our I'm blanking on a word here, but basically the Swiss Army knife of the band. His name's Scott, and he plays trombone and he plays keyboards, and he's just an excellent, excellent musician who kind of fills out a lot of that space and helps us out.
Yeah, it's so good. I feel like this is again one of those songs where there must be a bunch of Easter eggs in it if you are a fan of the
Yeah.
show. And even without that, like I loved it and I thought like I'm not sure which character this is about, but I know plenty of people that like fit that chorus line, you know. um but I think that it's so like, that just listeners I won't sing it, but the chorus says, "Fuck with your head, fuck with your mind, fuck with the fabric of space and time." And I just I don't know why it just hit me the way that it did, but I don't know if it's the rhyme scheme. I don't know if it's that we all know characters like that. I don't know if it's the desire we all have to like be able to have the ability to fuck with the fabric of space and time. Like there are so many times I wish I could go back and redo something. But I just like I felt like this song transcended, I love that you called it Trek rock on your website. Like it goes beyond that, and I think I told you has already landed a place on my 2025 playlist. I love it so much.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, for the Star Trek folks, this is about a character called Q, who is sort of a trickster god character in the Star Trek universe. And he's this all powerful being who kind of pops in and out and messes around and likes to play jokes on the crew. And he's a Loki trickster god type who rearranges the chess pieces of humanity and creates these fun little adventures for them. And I think some of the best episodes of Next Generation involve this character. So, but what I liked about it was that he is a person who has a little bit of self-awareness of that he's doing it because he's bored. Ultimately, he's messing around, and there is an episode, for instance, where he becomes a human being. He wants to understand what it's like to have the limitations of a human being, and realizes what that is, but also feels arrogant about the fact that he did it amazingly well. So that's sort of the impetus for the song. And I love these big sing-along choruses, right? They're just a lot of fun. I definitely wrote this chorus first. I liked what I had there melodically. I was like, oh, we could all sing that. Maybe we could get a whole room singing that. Now, I have to be honest, one of my bits of hesitancy about the song was cursing within the song. I
Oh.
I do curse in my day-to-day life. We curse on the podcast I host. I don't really have a problem with it, but maybe there's something insidious about the idea of putting curse words into a catchy melody that I was just wondering how that would land with, my mother or other people's children, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that, but for me, it's what made the song, and not that I have to have like an F bomb in every song. I just thought that it drove the sentiment home in a
Yeah.
way that you can't. I mean, I have a pretty liberal policy on cursing, even in our home. To me, it's like punctuation. Maybe it's because we're Irish, like, but like it's like punctuation. Like no word, like words have the meaning that we give to them, and so. But I understand like being a little bit hesitant to include
Well,
that as your main chorus.
that's why I ultimately did include it. I thought the catchiness of the melody, and I thought it was well placed, basically, and not
Yeah,
superfluous. So
yeah.
ultimately, yes, I'm happy with it.
It didn't feel like you were dropping it in there just to be like a shock jock or whatever. But
Exactly.
and I feel like again, the whole album is good, and I think that you can enjoy it entirely without. I don't know that I've ever, again, being perfectly honest, I have maybe seen like one or two episodes of Star Trek Next Generation. So it
Sure.
was like, and I still was able to fully embrace the album. I mentioned earlier hearing influences, but like I got Pink Floyd vibes from Holographic. I got Weezer vibes from Broccoli, which are other songs on the album.
Yeah.
So I think that it's so cool for me, it was cool to kind of hear the different influences that played into creating an album that's totally unique and not like a lot of other things that are out there currently.
Oh, thank you so much. We certainly had a ton of fun making it. I agree. I think it's a very fun and easy listen, and it does hop around in genres, as you mentioned, which is
Mhm.
something I like, and perhaps something I learned from They Might Be Giants, who we talked
Yeah.
about earlier. This willingness to explore different genres and different ideas in the service of just having a fun bit of variety on your album, to me, is really cool. And I'm sure your listeners are attuned to this, but I think it's important to support people in your circle, independent musicians, independent creators generally, right? Go and give it a listen. Give all your other friends who make music, give their record a listen. Tell them you listen to it. I just can't encourage that enough. And anyone who's out there trying to make something, bravo.
Yes, 100%. And you never know like what the next thing is going to be. Like especially in this day and age, like things hit in ways that were never possible before, you know?
Sure.
And so again, I love promoting new artists. I love promoting different music. I love promoting passion projects. I love promoting weird things that I've heard or I've stumbled across. So I could not agree more. That's such a big focus of the show and why I love doing it. And so it was great. I'm so glad you chose to share Beverly Crushers with us. And you have quite a few other side projects. I'll give listeners the link to your website, but I also kind of dug in a little bit to some of the other stuff. Repeat After Me, there was a great song called You Can't Go Back from the Map Maker album that I really
Yeah.
enjoyed. Like there's a lot of stuff up there that is so good.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've done a lot. Almost all of it is with my co-host on 1001 Album Complaints, Tom. Some of it is with the other co-hosts. All of us together from the show actually are planning to release another record probably late in this year, which is going to be a Ghostbusters themed tribute
Yes.
record. So, we're all at that level of amateur musician where we know what we're doing, we know our craft, and we have a lot of fun writing and producing songs. And I think they sound great personally. So go
I
listen to
do
them.
too. I do too. And I encourage listeners to. Tom was also on the show. You can go back and check out past episodes with Rob and Tom. And if you haven't, you must go listen to 1001 Album Complaints. I talk about it a lot on this show because I love it so much. But all of the complainers are top notch. They're all musicians in their own right, and also like just a ball to listen to. Talk about albums that we all love, albums that we love to hate, albums that are guilty pleasures, like albums that you guys wonder how they made the list. I mean, they're all all different kinds. So, Rob, thank you so much for sharing what you're listening to this week, and again, bringing me the Beverly Crushers. Space and Time is going to stay with me all 2025. Um, Listeners, to learn more about Rob, you can visit the website at the Chop Unlimited. That's THECHOPUNLIMITED, the Chop Unlimited, and there'll be links to everything there, the podcast, the albums, the Beverly Crushers album is up there, merch, all of it. And this site, again, will point to all of the creative projects within Rob's collective. So definitely check that out. And as always, please be sure to follow, download, and share this show. And if you love listening, drop us a review on Apple or Spotify. And last but not least, to stay informed on all things Super Awesome Mix and what are you listening to, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Super Awesome Mix. Thanks for listening, and please join me again next week to find your new favorite song.